All right, I think we'll get started, and then some people join us. They'll catch up. This is going to get filmed too, so we encourage you to ask questions at the end so we can get some answers, because we're hoping that will run on the local TV station. So Nora and I are here presenting. Giorgio, the developer, will be joining us very shortly, as will Michael Walsh, the selectman. So I'm going to begin by trying to dispel a couple of myths that have developed and have been circulating in the community over the last few weeks, and also try to provide some clarity on the affordable housing issue that's an important part or component of this project, but it's complicated and hard to understand. The first myth that's circulating is that this redevelopment is something that's been rushed and that's occurred over the last couple of years. I started, as some of you know, 30 years ago with this town, and I've seen that the redevelopment of the town centers has been an evolving issue pretty much that entire period. Westwood doesn't have a traditional downtown, and there's a very real reason for it. It's historically based. We were once part of Dedham, and Dedham has the traditional town center. The centers that evolved here in Westwood on High Street was known as West Dedham, which was a neighborhood of Dedham, and along Washington Street, which was affectionately known all these years as Islington, also had a village center. In the early 1990s, the planning board, especially Don Sukma, felt very strongly that the town should be doing more to encourage the redevelopment of the two villages into more traditional town center. So one of the ways we came up with early on to try and foster that development was to redesign the roads as they pass through the town centers. So the first one we started with was Washington Street. Washington Street at the time was Route 1A. It was owned by the state. It was maintained by the state. They did the plowing, and they were looking to dump it. They didn't want that responsibility any longer. We got into a negotiation with them. We indicated to them that we would accept Washington Street as a town way, accepting the responsibility for maintaining it, but we wanted it rebuilt. And we didn't just want it rebuilt, we wanted it rebuilt in the way we would design it. So we designed the town center, the Washington Street through the town center in a way that worked for us. So such things as burying the utility poles, putting in period lights, putting in landscaping, putting in brick crosswalks, putting in sidewalks, all curbing. All those treatments were meant to foster redevelopment of the town center as a pedestrian-friendly place to shop and to walk. We did the same thing along High Street after that. We owned High Street, but we sought a town meeting approval for burying the utility poles, putting in period lights. We redesigned the roadway, put in a lot of traffic signals, left-hand turning movements to make it safer. We did treatments in the crosswalks, all the same sorts of things that we did in Islington. When we were doing the project on Washington Street, those of you that were here at the time will recall, Washington Street had angled parking in front of all of the buildings, commercial buildings in the town center. Those commercial buildings were owned by Alfred Magaletta at the time. Alfred Magaletta was suing us or appealing the reconstruction of the roadway. So we had to find a way to replace the parking spaces that we took from him, which led us to buying the former Texaco gas station, which we did, and those parking spaces were meant to, and they were a settlement with Mr. Magaletta for the parking spaces we were taking from his property. Those that aren't familiar with it, Mr. Magaletta's properties are now the properties in question in this project for the most part. Giorgio purchased all of 100% of the Magaletta family land holding a few years ago. On High Street here, when we did subsequent to rebuilding the roadways, what we did was hired a consultant. And the consultant came and analyzed both of the town centers and made suggestions for improvements or ways that we could enhance the commercial district. Some people will recall that we purchased a parcel of land from the Boston YMCA that was in the center, that was going to be, a YMCA building was going to be built. There were a lot of people that were opposed to it, so we bought the property from them. We broke off the front piece as a result of this consultant's advice. We sold it to an optometrist to fill in a gap in our town center. Another improvement that was made was right here. This library was meant to be an enhancement to the town center. We had an obligation to historically preserve the Coburn School. Went out with an RFP. We relocated to the former Islington, not Islington, the library lot where the original library was. We sold all that to a private developer. Now there's a bank and 6 apartments upstairs. It was the first example of mixed-use development in Westwood. When Islington Church decided to disband because of declining membership, they approached the town and offered to sell us the church and the MMO classrooms. There was an alternative proposal being floated by a developer who was looking to buy the building and convert it into apartments. We thought that wasn't a good thing or something that we were interested in seeing develop one off, plus the price was good. We could preserve the MMO. We could add some office space that we needed in the short run for youth and family services. So we purchased it. The real reason for purchasing it was more to control the development in the future. We own the abutting parcel with the parking, so we were better suited to see a redevelopment of the corner than just selling that one parcel singly. So that was one of the justifications for purchasing it at the time was someday we will redevelop Islington Center. So the current proposal to redevelop Islington Center isn't something that just started or just came about in the last couple of years. This is something that's been going on or been discussed and evolving over the last 25 years. The second myth that I want to dispel is that the Board of Selectmen acted inappropriately in moving this year's town meeting. The charter does provide that the first Monday in May be the official town meeting night. However, the past practice in Massachusetts state law has a provision to reschedule the meeting if there's some reason for doing so. This year, and so that happened several years ago in Westwood. There was a year where we had an override that failed, and with a week between the override failing and the town meeting, there wasn't enough time to make the adjustments to the budget, figure out how we're going to deal with the failed override. And so that year, when the town meeting was being held in Zavarian Brother High School, we decided to add another week to the process, so give us a little bit more time. And so the town meeting was rescheduled to another date. That was the other time that the town meeting had been rescheduled here. This year, what happened was, as the town meeting approached, we knew we were on a tight time frame. As town meeting approached, we had a couple of pieces of information that were still not completed. We had 2 consultants, one working on an appraisal, one working on a soil test. Because of their business, what they had already in their queue, and when they could fit us in, meant that they weren't going to be able to get to us until the middle of April. And with the town meeting, first part of May, that was not going to give us enough time. So the Board of Selectmen opted to add another 3 weeks to the process, and rescheduled the town meeting to May 30th. So this is something that the board has the authority to do. They're the chief executive officer. Doing that in the best interest of everybody involved, so that everybody can make educated choices based on very real information. Otherwise, the FinCom book would have come out with the promise that, well, we'll come to town. Feel that that's the appropriate way. We used to do it that way years and years ago, but we haven't done that in years. The Finance Commission is always making recommendations before we get to town meeting, or 99% of the time. The last thing I talk about it because it's complicated, and I'm listening very carefully to what I'm hearing about affordable housing, and questions and comments and statements that get made about the affordable housing as it pertains to this project, and I'm realizing that there's a few missing pieces that people don't understand. We'll try and add those pieces so it can add some clarity to what we're dealing with going forward, and how this project can, and when Nora gets to that part in her presentation, I hope you'll have a better understanding of why it's important, why what we negotiated in this development agreement is important to the affordable housing part. First of all, cities and towns in the Commonwealth are obligated by Chapter 40B of the Mass General to provide 10% of their housing units as affordable. And if a community does not achieve 10% affordability in this community, as counted by HCD, then we're subject to the so-called unfriendly 40B. Now, what an unfriendly 40B is a developer that wants to develop affordable housing will come into a community. They'll seek a comprehensive permit. It's a state, Chapter 40B provides for this. It's a state law that allows the developer to propose a project setting aside zoning. So let's, Chase Estates is an affordable housing project. When it was proposed, it's in a 1 acre zone. What they came in is proposed back then, 300 units. I think the density was like 8 units per acre on that parcel. That was the first proposal that they made. That would be termed an unfriendly 40B because the density is way too much. Everybody was upset about that project back then. If the town then went forward and denied it, if you're above 10%, you're okay. Nothing happens. There's no appeal guaranteed for the developer. On the other hand, if you're below 10% and the developer appeals it, the state housing committee will hear the hearing, and 98% of the time they will decide in favor of the developer, and the development will go forward. So we have made a special effort for years to get above 10%. We achieved it this last decade with University Station's rental units. There's one of the parcels in that rental unit that's one of the buildings that are a rental unit that's 25% affordable. Now, you need to also understand one other fact about 40B development or affordable housing development. The state counts or gives us credit for affordable housing units depending on the type of construction you have or the type of project you have. So there are two types of projects. There's owner-occupied homes and condominiums. Chase Estates is an example. And there are rental projects with affordable. Chase Estates has 25% of its units affordable, but it's single-family owner-occupied units. So the state only counts the affordable units in that project. So out of the 100, 25 are affordable, so we only get credit for 25 units. In University Station, as I just explained, there's one building that has 220 units in it. Of those 220, 55 are affordable. That's 25% of those units. So that project is counted, we get credit for 220 units of affordable housing in that project because it's a rental project. And why would the state do this? Well, the state does that because cities and towns are more inclined to approve a single-family owner-occupied project than they are to approve a rental project. And so to incentivize communities to do rental projects, because the state gets even the rental project, even the rental rents usually are cheap enough that they're affordable to families. They fit a middle range, so to speak. So the state is trying to encourage those developments. So they give us 100% count, as long as 25% of the units are affordable. The other building in University Avenue only has 10% affordability, and so we only get to count the 10% or the units that were constructed. And we purposely did that. I mean, the developer of University Station has the ability to construct 600 units. We don't know if they'll get permitted for that, but that's what the zoning says. They're required to do 15% of those units as affordable, and we negotiated for them to front-end load the affordable units in that 220 unit building so that we could get enough units to get over 10%. And then the rest of the units that they build out in University Station will only have 10%, which keeps them, as they build them, 10% of them being affordable. It's neutral as far as losing ground on the affordable housing requirement. I hope I haven't confused them more, but. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Nora, who will go through a PowerPoint presentation. And you all know Giorgio, the developer.
Sorry I was late.
All right, so some of you are new to the project. Some of you participated from the very beginning over the last couple of years on this. I'm going to go through a presentation that I've given a similar version of this before, so I apologize if you've already seen it. But for those that are newcomers, I want to make sure we touch on everything. So I want to begin by pointing out where we are, where the project is that we're talking about. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Islington. We have the Islington Community Center here, which I'm going to refer to as the ICC. We have the Islington Library here, which we refer to as Wentworth Hall. It's the name of the building. Is an historic building in Westwood, the home of the original town hall. And we have the CBS building here, Cafe Diva here, and here's our new fire station. Just look at that from another angle, looking down Washington Street. We have the CBS building here, the Islington Islington Branch Library, or Wentworth Hall here, the ICC, there you see our fire station. And on here, on the west side of the street, we have the municipal parking lot. And just one other view, this is looking from East Street. We have the ICC here, Wentworth Hall here, CVS up the street, Cafe Diva, the municipal parking lot. Now to look at this in map view, this shows that there are 8 parcels that are involved in this project. 4 of them are controlled by the town and 4 of them are controlled by the developer. To begin with the town's parcels, we have the ICC here. It's a parcel that's fully covered by the building. We have Wentworth Hall here, which includes parking that's currently used for both the Islington Library and for the ICC. We have the municipal parking lot here, which actually goes all the way back here. There's a wooded area on that now. And then we have a parcel over here that the town owns. We refer to it as the driveway parcel or the East Street parcel. A portion of that parcel right here, where the driveway enters to get you to the ICC, to Islington Library, or to CVS. You'd go in this driveway. That's part of the project. So those 4 parcels are the town-owned parcels. Then the developer owns 4 parcels. This one is the current CVS Crown Cleaner building. This one is the Cafe Diva building. Here we have the Westwood Tailor Shop that's been closed for a couple of years. And on this parcel, which is a very irregularly shaped parcel that comes all the way back here, we have the Blue Heart Tavern, which has been in storage for just over 2 years. Those 3 parcels are owned by the developer, Giorgio Petruzziello. He also has an option to purchase this parcel right here, which is the Cohen residential property at 277 Washington Street. So to describe what the project entails, I'm going to speak about it in 2 parts: the School Street side, the west side of Washington Street, and the East Street side on the East Street side of Washington Street. On the School Street side, the proposal calls for the replacement of the Cafe Diva and Westwood Tailor Shop buildings with a new CVS retail pharmacy building. It also calls for the town to relocate and renovate Wentworth Hall, to reuse as the Islington Library, and to add an addition for the Youth and Family Services offices, for recreation programs, and for all the community uses that are currently taking place in the ICC. The project also involves the construction of 72 parking spaces, off-street parking spaces on the west side of Washington Street. 40 of those spaces would be owned by CVS. 32 of the spaces would be owned by the town, and there would be cross easements over both parking lots so anyone could park anywhere at any time. There would also be an additional 6 on-street parking spaces. Spaces would be added to the west side of Washington Street, where there are no spaces today. This is looking at that in plan view. Here's Washington Street, School Street. Here's the proposed new CVS building, the CVS parking, the municipal parking, an open space area. This is the relocated Wentworth Hall, the old Islington Library building, and this is an addition that would be put on that building for Youth and Family Services, and a lower level would be a hall, a community space, to replace the hall in the ICC. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but this building up here, right along Washington Street, is the Blue Heart Tavern. So now here's to describe what the project entails on the East Street side. The developer would replace the Islington Community Center with a new 3-story mixed-use building. That building would have 13,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space on the first floor, accessible from Washington Street. It would have 2 levels above that, with a total of 18 2-bedroom condominiums, and underneath it would have 36 parking spaces to be used by the owners of the condominiums and by the businesses that are in that building. The developer would also renovate the CVS Crown Cleaners building that's on the east side of the street now for new commercial use. Crown Cleaner would stay there, but there would be another commercial entity that would go in there. And they would create a 5,000 square foot new home for the Mother's Morning Out MMO Nursery School, along with a 40-foot by 37-foot new playground in the back of that building. The developer would also construct 52 off-street parking spaces to serve both the mixed-use building and the commercial building, and also add 12 on-street parking spaces on the east side of Washington Street. Some of those spaces exist now, some of them would be brand new. This is to look at that side of the street in plan view. This is Washington Street and East Street. Right here is the location where the mixed-use building is, with parking below. Here is the renovated former CVS building, or current CVS building, that will now be a general commercial building and home for MMO. Here's the MMO parking lot, and there will be parking here and here. No, it's not working for me. Had a little trouble with it earlier. That's all right. I can manage. Thank you, but I'll manage with just the clicking away. Thanks. So this slide is to illustrate the proposed. Get back up there. The proposed CVS building. It shows two views there. One is the west side elevation. That would be visible along Washington Street. Sorry, I must have skipped a page. Sorry. Go back. The Washington Street elevation, you'd see from Washington Street. The side view is the School Street elevation. Moving along, we have the west side, which you would see if you were coming up School Street from the School Street playground towards Washington Street. And then on the bottom is the parking lot side. As you can see, this building is designed to be more residential in character and to reflect the gable-ended structures that are prevalent in Islington. Here's an elevation of the ICC replacement building, the new mixed-use building. I want to point out that this is an elevation that shows the building as if it's all flush, one-dimensional, and that's not the case. It's three-dimensional, which you'll see, and I'll go into more detail when we get to the renderings here. All right, so this shows two views of that building along the East Street side and along the north side elevation. The north side is looking at the building from where CVS is today. The East Street side is looking approximately from the fire station or Morrison Park. This is the prominent front section of the building. This is the portion of the building that will be stepped out, similar to the front of the building now. It replicates the steeple. It's an identical replica of the steeple, and it has a pediment at the front that is intended to replicate the pediment that's in front of the ICC now. This is the proposed renovation for the existing CVS Crown Cleaners building. Again, you can see it's quite different than what we have there now. The building structure, the underlying structure is reused but fully renovated, and the character of the building changes significantly. Crown Cleaner would remain in the building on the left, and a new commercial tenant would be added on the right. Here we have the side views of that building. The one on the left would be the view from Sal and Rocco's, and the one on the right would be the view from the mixed-use building. And here's the back of the building where MMO would be. They'll have their own entrance, and as you can see, it's a lower level space, but it's a ground level space from this side of the building. So this is where you enter CVS now. For those of you who go in CVS from the back, you climb those stairs and go up to the upper level. There'll be a new ground level entrance for MMO. And their playground, you don't see it in this illustration, but it would be right in front of that doorway. So now I want to walk you through some existing views and some renderings that the developer's architect put together to show general views of the project from a similar vantage point. So here we are looking at the ICC building from about the area of the Wild Blossom restaurant. And here's another view from that same perspective of what the new mixed-use building would look like. Here's a view of the ICC looking from, if you were flying above the current fire station, and you can see across the way Cafe Diva, the town parking lot, CVS, and Wentworth Hall. Here's a view of what the new building would look if you were flying over the fire station and looking from the same perspective. You have the new mixed-use building here. You have the new commercial building with MMO here. The new CVS building. The new municipal parking lot. Here is the relocated Wentworth Hall with an addition on the back for youth and family services and community space below. And here's the relocated Blue Heart Tavern. Here's another view of the ICC showing the parking lot right up against East Street. And here's a view of the new mixed-use building from a similar angle. Note the trees that would be added along East Street. And another view looking at the center from above the Wild Blossom restaurant. So you see the ICC, the Wentworth Hall, CVS, Cafe Diva. And a similar view of what that would look like later. If the project's approved, we have the mixed-use building here, the commercial building next door, the new CVS building, the Wentworth Hall with an addition on the back, and the Blue Heart Tavern. Here's a view looking down Washington Street, where we have the CVS building, which has a quite different character today than it will if the project is developed. Wentworth Hall, Islington Library, and the ICC. And here's a view of what that would look like in the future with the new commercial renovated building, the mixed-use building, Blue Heart Tavern, the Islington Library with addition, and the CVS building. In the background, we have the current commercial building that has Wild Blossom through to Islington Pizza, and we have the mixed-use building that the Petruzziello's already built, and the new fire station. So now I want to talk about all of the issues that were discussed throughout this lengthy process, and there were many. We started with discussions in front of the Islington Task Force, moved on to the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, and the Finance and Warrant Commission. Throughout that process, there were multiple public meetings and public hearings with significant participation from residents, and the project evolved over time in response to the comments that were made and the questions that were asked by those involved residents. So going back to touch on what Mike Gillette had started talking about, this project is not something that just came out of nowhere and is being rushed through the town meeting. The project actually began back in the 90s. From 94 to 95, we saw the Islington Center roadway improvement project, roadway and sidewalk reconstruction, underground utilities, and the acquisition of the gas station for a municipal parking lot. Soon after that, we saw the acquisition of the Islington community property to buy time and for planning and zoning changes, and to seek out a potential commercial developer when the time was right and the use was appropriate. After that, we saw other renovations, other improvements in Islington that actually aren't on this slide yet, such as the renovation of the School Street Playground and the complete reconstruction of Morrison Park. From 2011 to 2015, we worked on our zoning. We began with creating the new flexible multiple-use overlay district zoning. It was adopted in 2011 to apply to several commercial areas throughout the town. I believe it was 2014 when it was added to the two town centers, Washington Street and High Street. And in 2015, mixed-use development allowing residential uses for up to 50% of a project were added to the FMUOD 6 and FMUOD 7. So now coming into the detailed review of this project, that really began in September of 2015 when the Board of Selectmen established the Islington Center Task Force. This was not a standing committee. This was a new group of individuals that was called together specifically to review issues in Islington Center and to find the best way of revitalizing this important section of our town. The task force was formed in September of 2015. In May of 2016, the task force issued a request for proposals. They received one proposal in response to that RFP. There were 4 or 5 developers who took a look at the proposal, or the request for proposal. Only one, Petruzziello Properties, submitted a proposal, and that was reviewed by the task force. The first review session was held in September of 2016, and the review continued for 7 months on a monthly basis with a 21-member board composed of residents of Westwood, including 3 residents of the immediate neighborhood and 2 Islington Center businesses, as well as representatives of various town boards and committees. In April of 2017, the task force recommended that the Board of Selectmen enter an agreement with the developer to allow this project to go forward. In September of 2017, the Selectmen signed a memorandum of understanding that allowed for an application to be submitted to the Planning Board by the developer. The developer prepared a FMUOD, Flexible Multiple Use Overlay District, special permit application and submitted that to the Planning Board in 2017, December 2017. Hearings began on that application in January of 2018, and the Planning Board continued hearings, all open to the public, all with extensive public comment, and made a decision in April of this year. At that time, the Planning Board voted to issue the special permit and to recommend approval of 3 warrant articles by the Finance and Warrant Commission to send those to town meeting. The Planning Board granted the special permit. They also met with the Conservation Commission, who subsequently granted an order of conditions to allow the project to go forward. They took the unusual step of meeting in a joint session. They do this occasionally when there's a large project that may require some changes, and we want both boards to understand each other's, the important facets of the project that each board wants to consider. There were actually no changes that the Conservation Commission required. In fact, they thought that the proposal significantly improved and significantly benefited the wetland areas adjacent to the project. The next step was going to the Finance and Warrant Commission. The Finance and Warrant Commission reviewed this proposal over 4 separate public hearings in March and April of this year, and voted to recommend the town meeting approve all 3 articles. So in May of 2018, on May 30th, next Wednesday, town meeting will have the opportunity to consider those 3 articles that would allow this RFP project to go forward. Some of the issues that were discussed at all of these multiple public meetings over a 2.5-year period, one of the most important ones was architectural design and aesthetics. The drawing on your left is an early rendering of what the developer saw as a mixed-use building in Islington Center. Residents commented on that, and they expressed a strong opinion to preserve the character of the ICC. We heard from many that people appreciated the look of a New England church and wanted to preserve that. So the drawing on the right is what later evolved as the developer instructed his architect to replicate the look of the church in the new mixed-use building. Also looking at architectural design and aesthetics, there was concern of what a typical CVS building would look like and whether it would fit in with Islington Center. The building on your left is the standard CVS building. There's one of them just like that in Dedham that we're probably all familiar with. The building on the right was the one that was specifically designed for CVS to operate in Islington Center. It's not like any other CVS building. It's designed specifically for this location. Another comment was about the size of the proposed CVS building. The CVS building was originally proposed to be approximately 13,000 square feet, and it originally had a drive-through. We heard concerns from residents both about the size of the building and about concerns about a drive-through. We have several drive-throughs in town, including right next door here and across the street. Most of those are bank drive-throughs. We've never had any problems with it, but there's still a perception of a safety issue with the drive-through. Residents asked that the drive-through be eliminated. So the developer went back to CVS and at first negotiated removal of the drive-through, but we still had this larger 13,000 square foot CVS building. Residents were still concerned about the size of the building, so the developer again went back to CVS and requested approval of a reduced size building. CVS then said, sure, we'd be happy to reduce the size. Please put the drive-through back. So the proposal turned to that. Then we went to the planning board again, and the planning board listened to residents, most of whom said, we love the smaller building compared to the bigger one, still don't like the drive-through. So the developer continued negotiating, ended up with a smaller CVS building without a drive-through. That does come at the cost of the profits that go into this project and the amount of money that's available to make all aspects of the project work. So the proposal, the current proposal that received its approvals from the Planning Board and from the Conservation Commission is the smaller CVS building right here. It totals 9,950 square feet with the 3,000 square feet of storage in an attic, not on the main floor. So just to give you an idea of what a nearly 10,000 square foot building looks like in comparison to other buildings in town, the building right across the street, across School Street, the Islington Pizza Wild Blossom building, is 11,268 square feet, so slightly larger than the proposed CVS will be. The Good Plaza, post office to toast office, right here across the street, is over 15,000 square feet. The Stagecoach Plaza, down High Street a little bit, is over 18,000 square feet. And then going back to Islington, the largest building in Islington, just down the street, is the Roach Brothers grocery store, which is nearly 5 times the size of the proposed CVS. To give you a comparison of what this proposed CVS looks like in comparison to other CVS buildings in the area, in Medfield, many of you are familiar with the CVS in Medfield, that's just over 10,000. So that's about close to 500 square feet larger than this will be, but fairly similar. Different design, but about the same size. The CVS in Dedham is 12,000 square feet. There's one in Medway that's 13,000 square feet, Foxborough over 13,000 square feet, and Framingham over 15,000 square feet. 13,000 is about the general size that CVS builds now, and they build them with drive-throughs. So for us to have a proposal for under 10,000 square feet without a drive-through is quite an accomplishment. There were also issues that were brought up regarding traffic. One of the primary concerns was the residents who were interested in speaking about this project expressed concern about trucks driving out of the CVS parking lot and onto School Street and continuing through the School Street neighborhood. The planning board listened to that, and they are requiring no right turns by trucks out of the School Street exit from the CVS parking lots. Trucks can either leave directly onto Washington Street, or they can leave onto School Street, turning left, and then going up to the intersection with Washington Street to go either right or left. We also discussed traffic from the point of view of whether the project would add unnecessary or inconvenient traffic to the already congested Islington Center. There's no doubt that there's quite a bit of traffic in Islington Center, just as there is here on this side of town along High Street. The vast majority of that traffic is pass-through traffic. It was studied by the developer's engineer, and it was studied by the planning board's own peer review engineer. They looked at it from every aspect, and both concluded without a doubt that this project would not add significant traffic to Islington Center. Most of the customers, in fact, for the stores and restaurants, coffee shops, and bakeries that will go here will be pass-through traffic that's coming through. Pass-through traffic is traffic that's coming through Westwood, coming from a town outside of Westwood, going through Westwood, and going to another town outside Westwood. So along Washington Street, in the evening hours, the majority of traffic is traffic coming from Dedham through to Norwood. And in fact, going in the morning hours, it's just the opposite, coming from Norwood through to Dedham. A lot of that traffic comes through Washington Street to avoid the intersection of Route 1 and Everett Street. There's a terrible backup at the light there, and it saves people time to jump off and take a short section of their travel coming through Islington. That adds tremendously to the volume of traffic that we all have to deal with because vehicles choose to go that way to save time. So one of the concerns that we heard repeatedly from residents, beginning at the task force and continuing through the planning board hearings, was that it would be much more convenient to have a left turn arrow for southbound traffic on Washington Street to be able to take a free left-hand turn onto East Street. In the evening hours and on weekends, there's quite a bit of backup. So if you ever are driving south on Washington Street and looking to turn left onto East Street, you may sit there for several light cycles waiting for your opportunity to turn left. The planning board understood this, and they asked their engineers to make sure that this project could accommodate a free left-hand turning signal. They will not add a separate lane. They will add a turning signal, so it'll be much like the signal we have now coming north on Washington Street to turn left onto School Street. It will be a dedicated time in that. If you want to turn left, you stay in the left lane. If you want to go straight through, you stay in the right lane. The planning board and the task force also looked very closely at parking. We heard from many residents that they thought that there was a shortage of parking in Islington Center. So again, we had two sets of engineers review this, the developer's engineer and the planning board's peer review engineer, and they both came to the same conclusions. The existing parking in Islington Center, there are exactly 100 spaces if we combine the east side of the street and the west side of the street. And if we look at the uses that are currently taking place there, the demand for parking is 100 spaces. So there's exactly the number of spaces that are needed for those uses. What that means is when there are other events, like ball games at Morrison Park, there is a shortage of parking. But just for the commercial and the institutional uses, it breaks even. There's enough parking, but just enough. This project would bring us from 100 parking spaces to 178 parking spaces. So it would add 78 parking spaces to that area, a significant number. What's important here, though, is that the demand would only go up to 163 spaces. That means this project would not only add more parking, but it would add 15 parking spaces over and above what the project requires. That means 15 more parking spaces to be a stopgap for when additional traffic comes through town, when there are events at Morrison Park or other events in town. Another issue that was discussed repeatedly was housing type. The original proposal called for 28 one-bedroom apartments, and several residents commented that they were concerned about adding more apartments to Westwood, that they believed that residents who own their properties in the form of condominiums are more committed to the community. The developer listened to this and changed the project from 28 one-bedroom apartments to 18 two-bedroom condominiums. Like the change in the size of CVS, this significantly affected the bottom line for the project and significantly affected the benefits that could come to the town, the fiscal benefits that could come to the town. Also related to housing, we discussed affordable housing. Mike gave you a little tutorial on 40B. This project is a special permit project. All special permit projects in Westwood that involve housing have a requirement that 15% of the proposed housing units are affordable housing units eligible for listing on the subsidized housing inventory. That's the list the state keeps, where we have to maintain 10% of our overall housing stock as affordable housing. So this project has a requirement from the beginning to add 3 units of affordable housing to the subsidized housing inventory. We work with the developer to develop a procedure where we could actually get 12 units of affordable housing listed on our subsidized housing inventory instead of the 3 that were required. 9 additional units is very significant when we're trying to stay above 10%. The way this would be done would be by adding 1 additional affordable unit in the 321 Washington Street building. That's the mixed-use building that was developed about 2 years ago on the west side of Washington Street next to Islington Pizza. That's a building that has 12 apartments in it now. 10 of those are market rate apartments and 2 are affordable apartments. Those 2 are eligible for listing on our subsidized housing inventory. If this project is approved at town meeting, the first step the developer will take will be restricting 1 more of those apartments, so the 3 of the 12 units will be restricted in perpetuity as affordable units. That will allow us to count all 12 of the units in that building on the subsidized housing inventory. So there will be 9 market rate apartments and 3 one-bedroom affordable apartments, but all 12 will be listed on the subsidized housing inventory. This will go a long way to helping Westwood stay above 10% on the subsidized housing inventory. We also heard concern about Mother's Morning Out, MMO Nursery School. MMO has operated since 2004 in a town-owned building. Prior to that time, it operated in the Islington Community Church. When the town purchased the Islington Community Church in 2004, they gave a 5-year lease with a 5-year option for renewal to MMO, and they've been on a 1-year lease ever since. So the town receives $84,000 a year to allow MMO to remain in that building. Nowhere near a commercial rent that you would expect, so the town has been subsidizing MMO for many years. We heard that residents believe that MMO provides a very important service to the town. 1/3 of its children in that school are Westwood residents, and the community wanted to keep MMO. So we worked closely with the developer. We met with the board members of MMO on multiple occasions, and the developer agreed to provide brand new space, 5,000 square feet of a new school space in the current CVS building for MMO, built to suit, designed for the use intended, along with a new 40 by 37-foot playground in the back of it. And most importantly, the developer agreed to provide that space for the exact same rent, $84,000 a year, that MMO pays to the town now. And in addition, they agreed to allow them to keep their terms of renewing their lease in 1-year increments. Those are not commercially acceptable terms. It is not at all economically viable for any commercial owner to do that, but it's the only way that it would work for MMO. And the developer agreed to do that because it was important to the residents to make sure MMO had a home for as long as they choose to continue in Islington Center. We also had concern about other existing businesses in the area. As I mentioned before, Crown Cleaners will remain in place. Their space will be renovated, but they will stay in that same building. Matt the Barber is currently in the Cafe Diva building on the west side of the street, or had been at the start of this project. He has actually since moved to another building that the developer purchased further down, or further up, north on Washington Street, the former ski stop building. So he has newly renovated space in that building. And there's a second space, a second commercial space in that building, which will soon be occupied by the tailor. Has he already? Yes, actually, I knew that. There was a large article in the Westwood Press. The tailor has moved into his own space in the former ski stop building. So he's left Crown Cleaner and opened a larger facility right up the street. So all of the businesses that were in Islington Center in the Magaletta properties that wanted to stay were given a new home in the development. There was one issue that was discussed, open space. We heard from residents at multiple meetings that they'd like to see more open space in Islington. We actually heard from one resident who thought that all of the buildings should be removed and all of Islington Center should be turned into a park. We looked at this, and you know, Islington Center is our downtown. It's a local business district for a reason. Towns need commercial areas. They need them not only for the convenience of their residents, but they need them for economic viability. So turning the whole area into a park was not a possibility. We also noted that we have School Street Playground and we have Morrison Park, two lovely facilities with significant open space right around the center. So without adding substantial additional open space, we decided to concentrate on gathering areas and landscaped areas. This is a view of the proposed mixed-use building on the east side of the street. And you can see there are gathering spaces on either side of that building. These will have cafe seating, much like the Wild Blossom and Islington Pizza buildings across the street. There's also significant landscaping that's been added to all of the streets, both sides of Washington Street, this side of School Street, and East Street, as well as increased buffer areas where the project meets residential zones. The increased buffer areas will have 8-foot fences and lush landscaping to protect the residential abutters from the traffic and the views of the commercial area, much better than they have today. Another issue had to do with historic preservation of the Blue Heart Tavern building. This building sat next to Islington Pizza for many, many years. It was occupied until it became too unsafe to occupy, and then it was boarded up for a while. When the developer decided to put a mixed-use building at 321 Washington Street, he went to the planning board for a special permit on that building, and the planning board asked and made it a condition of that special permit that this building be preserved for almost 2 years to be held aside and stored on the property next to the closed Westwood tailor shop to allow time for people to find a way to preserve this building. So in over 2 years, there were a couple of residents who looked at it, who tried to find a way to historically renovate and reuse this property. And the single biggest issue they found was that there was no space to put it in. It was an expensive building to renovate, but even if they were able to invest the funds in it, they had nowhere to put it. So as part of this project, we have set aside a parcel of land right along Washington Street. This is in front of where we're moving Wentworth Hall to, putting the addition on the back of Wentworth Hall, and we're saving this parcel of space to be a location for the Blue Heart Tavern to be moved. We don't have all the details worked out yet. There are 3 options. The first option is that the developer can choose to move the building, renovate it, and reuse it, probably for commercial use on the first floor, possibly for residential use on the second floor. Another option is for a private individual to do the same thing, to receive both the land and the building for free, and to invest their own funds in renovating appropriately that building and reusing it. We know of a couple of residents in town who are interested in doing just that if this project goes forward. If neither of those options work out, the third option, which we don't know today if it's a viable option or not, but the third option would be for the town to decide if the town wanted to take that building. They would have the option of considering going back to town meeting and asking for funding to renovate it, or they could simply take the land that it's on, and that would be the end of the Blue Heart Tavern. So that's what we hope does not happen. And we're working through the different options and hope that it will be restored and used for some form of commercial use. Some have suggested putting a tavern back in there. Others have suggested a bakery. And we also have some people who are interested in using it for their office. We heard concerns about community space. The ICC building is well used today. It has the Youth and Family Services offices. It has several recreation programs. It has the MMO, as we discussed. But it's also used by community groups, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, several other community groups, and it's even occasionally used for birthday parties. We will continue all of those uses in the proposed new community space that would be in addition to the Wentworth Hall building, located now in the west side of Washington Street. We also discussed accessibility issues. The current ICC building and the Wentworth Hall, Islington Library as well, are not fully handicapped accessible. They're not code compliant, and they're certainly not energy efficient. The new Wentworth Hall relocated building, the new Youth and Family Services space, and new community center would be all of those things. It would be accessible to all, code compliant, and energy efficient. So then we talked about, what if we don't go forward with this project? What if we decide to keep the Islington Community Center? And we looked at the capital needs that that building has. The Islington Center Task Force actually spent quite a bit of time discussing this. The town commissioned a report by a company called On-Site Insight, and they established the minimum estimate for just keeping the ICC usable, replacing its roof, siding that has holes in it, replacing windows to try and tighten the building up, and making the most minor code improvements we can to bring it as close as possible to a more useful building would cost us over $1.7 million. We also looked at what it would cost to make the building fully usable, to put in an elevator so it would truly be handicapped accessible, to add air conditioning so we'd be able to use it all times of the year, and to reconfigure the Youth and Family Services space so it could actually meet the program needs of that department and make it a better building for recreation programs as well, and that would cost over $4.8 million to do that. We looked at the Wentworth Hall building, the Islington Branch Library, and the expenses there are less. It's a much smaller building. The building is just under 2,000 square feet, but they are still significant. It would cost us $258,000 to do the basic Band-Aid repairs on that building. Not to renovate the space, just to replace the roof, which is very much in need of replacing, replace the siding and the windows. This would not allow us to do significant handicapped improvements, just the minor ones. Then we looked at the financial impact of the project. We heard from residents that they were very concerned about making sure that this project is fiscally beneficial to the town. So the first thing we looked at is the current net annual revenue. That's the taxes received plus any rental receipts less expenses. And for the current conditions, our net annual revenue is $114,213 a year. And for the post-development conditions, it would be over $420,000 a year. We also looked at this from the perspective of the value of the town-owned parcels. Right now we own 4 parcels. If the project is approved, in the end we will own 1 parcel. The 1 parcel will be larger than the one we own on the west side of Washington Street now, but smaller than all of the property we hold. We use the starting value for the before session as the figure that we set out in the RFP. We said that the 4 projects in the RFP, the minimum amount we would be willing to accept for the projects was $2,575,000 of value. That amount could be in land, could be in cash, could be in a combination. Then we deducted from that the capital expenses that I just discussed in the ICC and the Wentworth Hall. If we kept the buildings at the value we set on them for the RFP, less the cost that of funds we need to put in them to keep the buildings running, the effective value of those buildings is $615,471. Then we looked at the after value of the property. What would we own when this project was fully complete, when we had 1 lot on the other side of the street on Washington Street with a brand new, newly located, historically restored Wentworth Hall, fully renovated library, as well as a community center, and the value of that came out to over $4 million, a significant increase in value. We also look specifically at tax receipts, ignoring all else and just focusing on what tax receipts are we receiving in Islington Center and what could we be receiving. Right now, we receive $62,073 a year in taxes for commercial properties that are involved in this proposal. If this project goes forward, we'll receive $356,000, a significant annual increase. So now I want to talk a little bit about the specific articles. There are 3 of them. The first one, Warrant Article 11, authorizes the Board of Selectmen to carry out a land disposition agreement with Petruzziello Properties for the sale and exchange of property in Islington Center. It allows us to swap and sell land to the developer. So what does that look like? The town would transfer land to the developer, and then the town would receive land back. So the town owns 1.54 acres of land in Islington Center. We would transfer the municipal parking lot on the west side of Washington Street, which is 0.68 acres, the Islington Community Center parcel, which is 0.34 acres, the Wentworth Hall parcel, where the Islington Library is, at 0.44 acres, and then that small driveway parcel, which is just 0.08 acres. Together, that's 1.5 acres, 1.54. Then we would receive land back from the developer. The new town parcel on the west side of the street, where we would relocate Wentworth Hall and would have a new municipal parking lot, would be 0.89 acres. That would include the open space portion that's back behind where the tailor shop is now. We would also receive the Blue Heart Tavern parcel, unless it's restored by others. If it's restored by others, they would keep it. If that project is not restored, we would receive that land at 0.04 acres. And then in addition to the land we get back, we would receive a cash payment of $2.2 million from the developer. So what that means is that the net transfer of land from the town to the developer is 0.61 acres, just over a half acre of land for $2.2 million. On the School Street side, for the phasing of the project, we would first give Petruzziello all of the land on the east side of the street, on the west side of the street, and then in time, Petruzziello, after developing the parking lot, would give us back a larger parcel, either 0.89 acres if it doesn't include the Blue Heart Tavern parcel, or 0.93 if it does. Looking at the east side of the street, in the second and third phases, we would give all of the land we own on that side of the street to the developer, 0.86 acres, and would receive the $2,200,000 in return. So we took a look at what that offer means. What does $2.2 million look like? For 0.61 acres, or if we even just look at it for just the 0.86 acres on the east side of the street, that's $58.73 a square foot, or over $2.5 million per acre. We compared that offer price to the RFP price, the price that we required in the RFP, which for the land on the east side of Washington Street came to $1,975,000. The RFP price asked for $52.72 a square feet, or almost $2.3 million per acre. So the offer exceeds what we asked for in the RFP. Then we looked at not just that it exceeds what we were asking for, but we compared it to other commercial properties in Westwood. We started looking at Roach Brothers, which is the nearest expensive commercial property in town, and we looked at the assessed value of that, which is $6.05 a square feet, or $263,000 per acre. We looked at Eversource, a significant building, high on a hill, visible from Route 128, and very profitable. That's only $10.74 a square foot, or $467,000 an acre. We looked at new construction. Wegmans first, at $21.70, or just under $1 million an acre, and Target, the most expensive land in the town of Westwood, at $24.04 a square foot, or just over $1 million an acre. So when we compare that to the $58.73 a square foot, over $2.5 million an acre that we're receiving when we transfer land on the east side of the street to Petruzziello, I think we can agree that we are getting significant value for the property. Land in Westwood is expensive, but nowhere is it anywhere near that expensive. Warrant Article 2 proposes that the town authorize the selectmen to borrow money to pay for the design, relocation, and construction costs to move, renovate, and put an addition on Wentworth Hall. The proposal is to implement this design, which we have early concept plans, and we will work through if this is all approved at town meeting. The initial concept plan shows the existing Islington Center building down at the bottom of the screen. This rectangle is the existing library building. If you're familiar with it, this is the main door. You come in, the director's office, circulation desk, and there's a restroom here and a staircase in the back. We would add this building in the back, which would have a handicapped accessible entrance off of the new parking lot. It would have an elevator to go down to the new hall space in the basement, as well as a set of stairs. It would have new handicapped accessible restroom facilities that would be all convenient to the library. So if you're coming to a program at the library, you need a handicapped accessible entrance, or if you're bringing a child in a stroller and you want a convenient way in, you can have that. Handicapped accessible restrooms. We'd also renovate the existing restroom in the building now. And then we're working with the library director to come up with a very interesting revitalization of the interior of the space. A lot of changes to make it function more the way current libraries function. Then there would be the Youth and Family Services offices back here. This would allow them to have individual offices to see clients in privacy, as well as a communal area where they could have their group events. Then on the lower level, we'd have a multi-purpose space. This space is actually larger than either of the halls in the ICC today. The ICC has two halls, one in the basement and one in the former sanctuary space. This building would have one hall instead of two, but that hall would be larger than either of the existing ones. It would have an additional men's and women's handicapped accessible restrooms. It would be accessible by elevator and by 2 staircases. This would also be designed in a way that allows us to bifurcate the room so that we could actually have 2 programs at once in the area, one using the rear portion of the front portion of the building and one using the rear portion. These are early concept plans, and they're subject to further improvement. This is our starting point, and this is the estimate for what this would be. The estimate is just over $3.5 million. Warrant Article 3 proposes that the town change the zoning of 2 parcels in Islington Center from residential zoning to commercial zoning. This is our existing zoning map here. This is the area we're talking about, East Street, School Street, Washington Street. And these are the 2 parcels that are shown in blue here. The business district is shown in purple, and the green dots represent the flexible multiple use overlay district. To zoom into that, the current zoning shows this parcel here, which is the Cohen parcel, a residential property that the developer has under agreement, and the Taylor Shop parcel here, which is residentially zoned but has not been used as residential property. It's been used as commercial property since the 1950s. The proposal takes the map on the left, which is the same as I just showed you, changes it to the map on the right. We can see the Cohen residential property is now part of the commercial zone with the FMUOD overlay, and so is the former Taylor Shop parcel. I want to talk to you a little bit about the phases of this project and how this would actually be accomplished. It would be a 3-phase project, and each phase would be approximately 1 year long. In the first phase, it would begin by the town transferring the municipal parking lot on the west side of Washington Street to the developer. The developer would then provide a cash payment to the town of $400,000, and we would immediately begin design of the Wentworth Hall project using those funds. The developer would then list an apartment at 321 Washington Street on the SHI, giving us an immediate addition of 10 units of affordable housing to the subsidized housing inventory. And then the developer would construct the new CVS on the corner of Washington Street and School Street, as well as both parking lots for the CVS building and for the municipal parking lot. At the end of the first phase, the town would then transfer Wentworth Hall's property on the east side of Washington Street to the developer, and the developer would transfer the new town parcel on the west side of Washington Street to the town. He would also give the town another $400,000, which the town would then use to create a foundation and to actually relocate Islington Library to that side of the street and to begin work on the renovations and the additions to that building. At the same time, the developer would renovate the current CVS building. In the first phase, they built the new building, so now CVS can vacate its old space and move over there. That building is empty, and the developer would create the new space in that building, completely renovate it, and make a new home for MMO. When that home was ready, and when Wentworth Hall was now ready to receive all of the uses that are in the ICC, we would start phase 3. MMO would move into its new space in the renovated CVS building. Youth and Family Services, recreational programs, and community programs would move out of the ICC and into the new expanded Wentworth Hall. And then the town would would turn over the East Street parcel and the ICC parcel to the developer, and in exchange would receive the final payment of $1.4 million. At that point, Petruzziello would construct the new mixed-use building that goes across the ICC lot and the existing Islington Library lot. And then Petruzziello would file for 2 more additional affordable apartments to be added to our subsidized housing inventory, so that at that point there would be 12 new housing units on the subsidized housing inventory. Another question that was asked in the many public meetings that we had is, what happens if this project is not approved? What can happen to the land in Islington? What can the developer do with his land? So we took a look at this from a couple of different perspectives, and we looked at it as 2 parcels, one on the east side and one on the west side, just looking at the land the developer owns, not looking at any of the town land. So in the first case, we looked at 266, 278 Washington Street. That's the existing CVS Crown Cleaners building. And we looked at it from the perspective of purely commercial development. There are a couple of uses that are allowed there. It's underlying a local business district, so any commercial use that fits within that district, general office, retail, restaurant, that's all allowed. In addition, a developer could apply for a mixed-use permit under the FMUOD district, go to the planning board. That's not by right. That requires a special approval from the planning board. It's a possibility. We just looked at the by right, which would be the commercial development. And the main factor in determining how much commercial development you could get is parking. It's all based on how much parking you could get. On that CVS parcel, it's well suited for underground parking, and it would allow the developer, if he chose, to create a new commercial building of 22,500 square feet, more than twice the size of the proposed new CVS building. Going down to 291, 295 Washington Street and 9 School Street, that's the Cafe Diva building and the Westwood Tailor Shop property. On the west side of Washington Street, we looked at what the developer could do there with a redevelopment of a commercial property. And there, he could develop a commercial property of just over 9,000 square feet, about 600 square feet smaller than the proposed CVS building, but very close in size. Then we took a look at, well, what happens if we get to the point where we do not have 10% of our affordable housing stock and we fall below 10% on the subsidized housing inventory? Then what? We looked at the possibility of residential development on either of these properties. On the CVS Crown Cleaner parcel, the developer would be able to develop up to 40 units of housing with underground parking. And to get an idea of how that would function, it could have up to 11 students based on current conditions in Westwood that we reviewed to figure out how many students per apartment we'd get. On the west side of Washington Street, where the Tailor Shop and Cafe Diva is, depending on how you developed it, that side of the street is not conducive to underground parking, so it would all be surface parking. On that side, you could get between 20 and 28 apartments, and depending on how many bedrooms in each apartment, that's the difference between them, you come out with different numbers of students. So we looked at it in all different ways and came up with between 4 and 8 students, 20 to 28 apartments. So the final thought I wanted to leave you with is how this project could affect the rest of Washington Street. This image shows the southern portion of Washington Street, where we have 6 properties. This is below Roach Brothers. So if you come down the street from the center, past Roach Brothers, there are 6 parcels there today. 3 of those parcels are vacant. 2 of those parcels have been vacant for over 10 years, including one that's been vacant for over 15 years. We have been trying numerous angles, working with the property owners, working with potential tenants, and we're just not seeming to break through. These properties are sitting here vacant, and we're looking for a catalyst to see them redeveloped. They're not helping anyone this way. They're not providing tax dollars. They're not providing vitality to the area. We believe this project could be a catalyst that would push these over the edge and see these being redeveloped for commercial uses. So that's another benefit that would come out of this project if it's approved at town meeting. So that's a lot of information to cover, especially for anyone who hasn't followed along on this project. I'd like to open it up to questions. Mike Gillette, the developer, Giorgio Petruzziello, Michael Walsh, and I would be happy to answer your questions. Mrs. Kelly. Just the slide before that. Have this?
Can I sit? Wendy Kelly, 107 Willard Circle. With this slide, it mentions apartments, no condos. Actually, one of the slides before that, a couple of them, you were saying apartments when earlier on it said condos.
So what this slide represents is what could happen if the project doesn't go through.
Right,
The
but doesn't
project
everything have to
calls
be
for
approved
condos,
too?
not apartments. This is
That all
if
has
we,
to go through all the boards.
this would not. So this is, what I was trying to explain is the residential properties that are shown in this version would only come to pass if we fell below 10% on our SHI. If that happens, we become subject to an unfriendly 40B. I'm not suggesting that Mr. Petruzziello is looking to do an unfriendly 40B.
Right.
I'm saying that if we became exposed and he sold the properties he owns to someone who was interested in doing that, these are the number of apartments that could be created there. So that's the maximum worst case scenario of what could come out of this development.
Could be, but they still have to go through the boards.
They
And
would
the board
only
can
have
say
to
no?
the board can say no, but then it would be overturned on appeal. There's one board. Our zoning bylaws would not apply in a 40B project. They would be sent to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit application. This is an application that's allowed by the state for any town or city that falls below 10%. It's an application that takes your zoning bylaw and sets it aside. Your setback requirements, your building height requirements, your material design, none of that applies. A developer decides what they would like to do, what would be profitable, and the zoning board reviews it. If they choose to deny it, that's an option. And in many cases, towns do deny 40B proposals that seem inconsistent with the character of their town. Then the developer appeals to the Housing Appeals Board. And I think Mike discussed this at the beginning. They have a 98% overturn record in favor of 40B developers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Yes.
Suda Sarma, 9 Phillips Brooks Road. I have many questions and concerns about this project, but I'll stick to the 40B topic. So in one aspect, as far as the 40B, I had wished actually there was more information about a little more context. Instead of the marketing that says we're at risk of a hostile 40B, I think there should be some context about how did we arrive at this point. And instead of presenting and socializing this as a, we're at risk, it's a threat, how do we get here?
Well,
right? So, but here's my question. So there have been developments, so the denominator as far as the housing inventory has gone up, so therefore our 10% has gone lower. So what decisions have been made in this town along the way that have led us to this point that we have a threat? The second part is it is being presented as it's an imminent threat and it's an inevitable threat, and I think that's wrong.
It's
I
actually
believe
right.
in affordable housing. I believe in affordable housing. We're a community and we should do this. But I think there's other options and solutions that could also be messaged.
There could be other solutions,
Yeah.
and I've said that all along. There may be, but there are no solutions in the track right now other than this one. So how do we get to this point? We have been working on affordable housing in Westwood for over 30 years. In fact, Westwood has been recognized as one of the most advanced towns in the state for the work that it's done in affordable housing. In 2010, when the last census took place, our denominator was established. We developed housing, affordable housing over time to make sure that we could get above 10%. As Mike mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, the University Station project is the one that actually put us over the top. When that project was completed, we were just under 13% in affordable housing. Then one of the projects we had in town, Westwood Glen Housing, came off of the subsidized housing inventory. To explain how that happened, that was a project, one of the very first ones. It was developed in the 1970s, and that was developed under a mass housing loan that had a 20-year requirement for them to provide affordable housing. After 20 years, the property owners at that time renegotiated their loan and bought another 20 years that they had to stay affordable housing. The town worked with the property owner when we knew that it was coming to the point where they would lose that requirement to stay affordable. We worked with the original property owner, tried to get them to sell the property to another owner who would continue affordability. They chose not to. They chose to sell it to a market rate developer. We then worked with that market rate developer. They were not interested in having affordable housing. We then worked with the Department of Housing and Community Development, and we were able to convince them to allow us to count some of those units on our subsidized housing inventory a little bit longer while we worked at getting above 10% at University Station. The reason they did that was that there were some senior citizens living in those apartments that had Section 8 certificates. They were actually qualifying as affordable units. They were not project units. There was no restriction. Those residents could take their Section 8 certificates and move at any time. But DHCD worked with us for a period of time.
So on that note, we have apparently a reserve set up in our town budget for affordable housing. Why not take care of our senior citizens?
So we don't yet. We have an article on town meeting floor that would establish a reserve fund for affordable housing. So we will get into that yet, but I'm still answering your first question. So you can
Okay,
ask another
the
one
second,
when I finish.
no, well, along the affordable housing line, sorry, it's the same
I'm still answering
stream
the
of
first question.
consciousness.
You can hold on. I just want to finish the
Okay.
first one. So you asked how we got to this point.
Yeah.
So in 2010, we had our denominator established. That was counting the units that were built in 2010. Between 2010 and 2020, other houses were built in town. People who own property understand that they have private property rights. There's a subdivision control law in Westwood that applies to everywhere else in the state of Massachusetts. If you have property that is subdividable, you are entitled to subdivide it. The planning board reviews those applications and has no choice but to approve them. They require them to be developed according to standards. If they are according to standards, they approve the developments. So we have had houses that were developed over time, over 10 years. Some were through subdivisions. Some were through approval not required plans, which is when you have frontage on a street, but your lot is oversized. You can divide it, create 2, 3, 4 lots, depending on the size of your house. We also have vacant parcels in town that over time people developed. For every house and every apartment that was created from 2010 to 2011, all of those units will be added to our denominator in 2020. And we must provide 10% of those units in affordable housing. So over the last 30 years, the town has taken every opportunity to create affordable housing where they could. We have Highland Glen. We originally had Westwood Glen, which we lost. We put an addition on Highland Glen, worked with the developers. That was not their idea, that was the town's idea, to add over 100 more units that counted on our inventory. We created Cedar Hill development and Chase Estates development. Those were added to our inventory. We have the Westwood Housing Authority that was created that owns 11 properties. 8 of those are duplex units, and 3 of them are single-family homes. Those are affordable properties. And then we worked on the University Station project to get a significant number of properties. In all cases, every attempt was made to stay above 10%. In addition, we worked on several other projects over the years, hoping to get additional affordable units. Some of you may recall a project at 215 High Street that did not go forward, that was reviewed for over a year by the planning board. There were attempts to get a project in there which would have provided additional affordable housing units, not nearly as many as this project will propose, but some affordable housing units. Whenever we look at special permit housing, we look to create new housing units. We have a project that's been discussed but never submitted for a planning board approval off of Canton Street, Canton Terrace and Blue Hill Drive. There's a proposal we had been working with a developer there to develop that would have affordable units as well. That has not gone forward. So, we changed all of our zoning requirements. Special permit housing did not used to have this requirement. It now does, that 15% of all units have to be affordable. So we are taking steps along the way to ensure that affordable housing will be created. We searched out a redevelopment project for these properties with that in mind, intending to create as many affordable housing units that could be listed on the SHI as possible.
So
Yes.
on that note, the state of Massachusetts also recognizes when a municipality has a housing production plan for affordable housing. Why do we not have one when we're trying to create a vision for our town? Because I don't think we have one. And secondly, on the I think that has to be discussed, that we have options. So if a developer wants to, by right, go and ask for a 40B to overturn some zoning rules because we have not met our 10% threshold, I understand it goes to the state, to make this decision. But if we had a production plan and said, we have this vision, I would think they would recognize, and we are making good faith efforts towards this.
So we are working on a housing production plan. It's been in the works for a while. We have a housing partnership that is taking on this task. The housing production plan allows you to request safe harbor, as does the 10%. The 10% is the same basis. You have safe harbor, you're not eligible for new 40B projects to come in unless it's a friendly 40B. The safe harbor in the case of a housing production plan allows you to stop at the one application you've received. It doesn't allow you to set back the ground to zero. With our housing production plan, as we put that in place, if we fall under 10%, we will still be vulnerable to one unfriendly 40B project. That project could be anywhere in town. It could be on residential land, commercial land, industrial land. We don't know what it would look like. We don't know where it would be. But I can tell you that I've spoken to developers, including several Westwood property owners, who are very much interested in developing 40B projects in Westwood. We're trying to maintain control, local control over our property, so that we have leverage and negotiating rights when someone does want to develop it. And the best way to do that is to stay above 10%. This project is one of many that we've been working on for years, and it is today the most likely to keep us above 10% of all the projects around. 12 units of affordable housing are significantly more than any other project that may come forward before 2020, if any come forward. Keep in mind that this project has been through a review period of over 2.5 years. We now only have 1.5 years until that census comes forward. So we have less time, fewer projects, and each of those projects would have fewer units. You also mentioned the Affordable Housing Fund. So on town meeting on May 30th, the town will be asked to establish a housing fund. The town has negotiated with the developers of University Station to receive funding from building permit fees that would have gone back to the developer. The selectmen negotiated an agreement that allows the town to keep those funds, and we believe that by putting them in a special account for affordable housing, we will be able to create up to 7 units of affordable housing. We have to do it in a very creative manner to get 7 units of housing with less than $1 million, but we think we have a path that we can get to that point. So with those 7 units, and with the 12 units that would come out of this project, including 10 right at the beginning of the project, that would give us 17 more units to add to our housing inventory. Today, with houses that were created between 2010 and today, houses that are actually have certificates of occupancy, we are 9 units short of 10% when the denominator is recalculated. So that's as of today. There are plenty of projects that have approvals where the houses have not been developed. Off of Canton Street, we have the Westwood Estates subdivision, which was approved just almost 2 years ago, but the houses have yet to be developed. There are 10 units there. On this side of town, we have the Fox Meadow Estates that has approval for 22 units, and I think 19 units are developed there. There's another development, Westview Estates, that's a 12-unit subdivision, and I believe 7 of the properties have been developed. There are 4 more. We also have individual scattered units throughout the town that are developable and that developers are working on. We have replacement homes where someone tore down a house and replaced it with 2. Those have not received their certificate of occupancies, so they're not counted yet, but we're still looking at them so that we can keep a handle on how many houses we'll need, how many affordable units we'll need to stay above 10%. So as of today, it's 9 units. By 2020, if everything that's in the pipeline is developed, it could go as high as 21 units. It's not likely to. It's likely to stay around 18, maybe 19 units. If it stayed around 18 or 19 units, and we were able to create 7 units with the Affordable Housing Fund that we're asking town meeting to approve, and this project was able to create 12 units, that would get us above the threshold, and we would maintain our safe harbor. We would stay above 10%, and we would maintain local control over development in our town. Doesn't mean we wouldn't develop more affordable housing. I think we would. I think over time we would still look at all special permit projects to add to our subsidized housing inventory, because between 2020 and 2030, we will have the same situation. We'll have to account for all new housing that's built in that time. So we will continue to strive to provide affordable housing, not only to stay above 10%, but to meet the needs of residents who need that type of housing and to keep Westwood an inclusive community.
Hi, I'm Mary Campion from 6 Brookfield Road. I'm wondering if Mike could comment on the University Station project, and in retrospect, would it have been possible to have a greater than 13% affordable housing rate in that project, which would have taken the pressure off of where we are now? Could it have been higher? And, you know, looking back, what do you say?
Well, we started from a point of the zoning requirement that we have, and Nora's explained this, where a special permit is required for housing units. We're able to require them to do something positive for the town to get that special permit. In those instances, we establish a 15% rate. Now, the theory here is 10% are required to keep the housing, whatever gets built in that development, stable, or make it satisfy the requirement of 40B. And the extra 5% was meant to try and offset the rest of the development that gets developed. We established that a long time ago. That's in zoning. And we thought about it hard. 15% seemed to be the balance, because the developer is going to, if you go to 25% or 30%, it becomes uneconomic for them to develop the development. So you need to find some balance that's fair. 15% seemed to be the right answer, so we stabilized on that. What we did with the University Station folks is we asked them to give us up front the extra 25% in that one unit, and we calculated it out. We knew Westwood Glen was coming off. We needed to get to 10%. That's been our goal. Now, we've been working since I came here. When I came here, it was 5%. We kept pushing the number up, but every decade, we fell back because the denominator keeps changing on us. So we keep going forward, going back. And we finally got to a point where we could negotiate with the developer at University Station to get above 10%. So we've calculated it out, and we said, well, if Westwood Glen effectively does fall off of our list, we want to be at least one unit above 10%. We figured it out. Now, the developer, in that instance, provided us with upfront for the whole 600 units to get to the 10%. The assumption being that if they built the whole 600 units, they would have to give us the amount of affordable housing that we had calculated in. They may not get to the full 600 units. They're building 100 units now. They've been permitted for 100 more units. But will they get to build another 200 units? We're not sure. I'm not, you know. So I think we got the most out of that development that we could possibly obtain. They had other reasons why they went along with us, but in hindsight, I think we did a great job in negotiating that deal with University Station, and I don't think we could have gotten anything better.
Just to add to that, you mentioned 13%. Actually, while the requirement is 15%, we're actually at 17.5% at University Station. We have 69 of the 350 units in the Gables building, and we have 10 of the 100 new condos. So when you add those up, you get 79 out of 450. It's 17.5% that we have today. If University Station does develop, the remaining 250 units that they have, they have the right by their zoning law to develop, subject to a special permit by the planning board or specific town meeting approval by the residents. That's the only way they can develop more housing. If they get to the point of developing those will be at 10%, which will bring the overall development to the 15% required by the zoning bylaw. But today, we're at 17.5% in University Station, so that should show you that University Station not only covers its 10% needed for those units, but provides additional units that the town needs. So there would be 45 units required to cover University Station, but there are 79 provided. So that's another 34 units to cover the development that we've seen elsewhere in town. Yes.
Ann Christian, and I live at 431 Clappertree Street. I wish this was happening on this side of town. We're ugly over here, and they're going to be nice looking. But my question is, if you have a two-bedroom condo, because I've heard parking is an issue. If you have two-bedroom condos, are there going to be dedicated parking spots for those condos, 2 per condo?
So the
And where are they going to be?
they will be right under the building. There'll be underground parking under the mixed-use building. So if I can get back to the plan there. Way back.
36 underground?
There are 36 parking spaces
Okay.
for the 18 units. Now, the planning board was concerned that we not put too much parking in the area. This is a transit-friendly area. There's a train station right around the corner. There's a bus line right in front of it. And the planning board feels strongly that residents who choose to live in these condos will actually walk to either of those commuting options and will only need 1 car, not 2. As a result, they required that each condo only have 1 dedicated unit of parking. So 18 condos, 18 dedicated units. And the other 18 units of parking, they asked the developer to sell to the condo owners only when they need it. What that allows is if a condo owner only has 1 car, that leaves another one of those spaces available for the commercial tenants and their employees, which keeps those cars out of the surface parking and puts them underground as well. Now, if all 18 condo owners have 2 cars, then they'll get the spaces. And then the commercial employees and commercial property owners will park in the surface parking. But that was assumed in the calculations. It was assumed that they would park there anyhow. We're just trying to make it the best to keep as much of that surface parking free for residents who are frequenting these businesses, going to Morrison Park, going to other businesses on Washington Street. And I have to say, I share your opinion that I hope this spreads to this side of town as well. And I've spoken to many residents who feel the same way.
Margie Lynch, 56 Parker Street. Just a few points, but first, we know what the proposed square footage is going to be for the new CVS, for the new MMO, and the new playground. It may be helpful if we know what is existing.
Sure. So the ICC is just over 11,000 square feet. It's actually 11,031 square feet now. In that 11,000 square feet, we have MMO, Youth and Family Services, and the Recreation and Community Programs. We're going to take that 11,000 square feet and we're going to split it into 2 parts. 5,000 square feet will go to the new MMO in the existing CVS building. The other 6,000 square feet will be the addition added to Wentworth Hall. So the existing Islington Library is just under 2,000 square feet, and we're adding another 6,000 square feet. So that new Wentworth Hall expanded building will be 8,000 square feet. It'll take the 6,000 square feet of town and community uses in the ICC and put them there, and it'll take the other 5,000 square feet of MMO uses and put them in another building. So it's apples to apples. We're recreating the same amount of space. I think we'll be about 31 square feet shorter than what we have at the ICC today, but the space will be far more efficient, code compliant, accessible than what we have today.
And is the playground will be bigger?
The playground will be slightly larger, and most importantly, it will meet the configuration that's required for the licensing of MMO. So that's been reviewed by the architect with the directors from MMO, with the board members, to make sure it meets their licensing requirements.
And the current CVS, how large is
The
that?
current CVS, I believe, is about 7,700 square feet, and the new one will be 9,950 square feet. So just over 2,000 square feet larger. Not
Exactly.
significantly larger.
So not a huge difference.
Not huge. It'll be a different design and different location, but not significantly larger. It will have quite a bit more parking. There'll be 40 spaces at the new CVS, compared to, I think, there are 25 at the existing CVS.
And my second point is the phases. What do you envision? Are we talking a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Each phase will be approximately 1 year. The first phase, if this is approved at town meeting on May 30th, the first step is for all town meeting articles to be approved by the Attorney General's office. That usually takes 90 days. So that brings us from May 30th, June, July, August, to the end of August. We envision that in the beginning of September, the first step in the project is for the developer to secure that subsidized housing inventory listing of the other apartments at 321 Washington Street. Once he does that, then we begin the transfer of land, we sell land to them, and they could begin the construction of the new CVS immediately. They could begin the work in the fall of 2018. If there's a delay for some reason, that moves to spring of 2019, and the project takes about 1 year from start to finish to do the first phase, takes another year to do the second phase, and we estimate another year to do the third. So overall, 3 years from start to finish. You know, everything is dependent on weather, they're dependent on the conditions that we find, but that's our expectation at this point.
So we're looking probably about a year without the branch or the community center.
No, it probably won't be quite that long, certainly no time without the community center. The branch library will be closed down from the time we move it across the street at the beginning of phase 2 until it's completed at the end of phase 2, which could be up to a year. We're going to keep that as short as possible. That's because we actually have to physically move that building and renovate it. The community center, however, the ICC community center will remain fully functional until the new Wentworth Hall Community Center is constructed, and then the uses will move over. So there'll be no disruption to community programs, recreation programs, ICC programs for the Youth and Family Services, or MMO. There will be some period of disruption to the Islington Library. So much like when this building was built, the Islington Library covered as the main library in the town. People were very happy to have it, and they used that exclusively. When the Islington Library has to close while we're moving and renovating it, this will be the exclusive library. However, we have an option to use some of the space in the sanctuary to move programs that are currently going on in the library. We might not move all the books over there. We may or we may not. That'll be up to the library director to decide. But programs like the quilting program or children's story hours or any programs that go on in the Islington Library will simply be relocated to the ICC during the period of construction.
One thing that's worth mentioning, Islington Library has been constantly under attack over the years. I know of 3 attempts to close the branch library, and the Islington residents have expressed opinion each and every time, action on town meeting floor to amend the budget in order to save the library in its current location. We reinvest in the library, update it, bring it into the 21st century. That library is probably going to exist now in Islington for another 50 years because it will be the library that that you would want it to be. Right now, it's currently a 60s vintage library. But it's enjoyed. People appreciate it, but I think this makes it more permanent.
For a library that's only open 3 days of the week, it's amazing the programs that are there.
Yes.
Hi, Paul Kelly, 107 Willard Circle. The Blue Hat Tavern, that's really bothering me personally. Option 4, I think you said, if the town has to take it over, is the town going to renovate it? Or does that, I think you said that has to go to town meeting to approve any money.
Right. So that's the least likely and probably the least popular proposal for the town to do that. If town meeting didn't choose to come up with an infusion of cash to do that, if the developer chooses not to develop it, and if the 2 other residents that I know are very interested in doing that choose not to, I don't think both of those things will happen. So I do think it'll be redeveloped. But the third option would be for the town to take it and decide if it wanted to spend the money to renovate it, that or not. If the town wanted to spend money to renovate the Blue Heart Tavern, that would be a meeting for a question for town meeting. Much like when we worked on the Colburn School building, we have the Obed Baker building. We have chosen not to spend town resources on renovating those historic buildings, but we've done all we can to hold on to them and try and find someone else who will do that for private uses. We could do the same thing, or we could choose to, if residents really didn't want to see money spent on that building, that would be the end of it. That building would go away, but we'd maintain the land. So the best option at this point, I believe, is for a private individual to take that land for free, to take the Blue Heart Tavern for free, and to invest their funds in renovating the building. And that's what I believe will happen.
What's the time frame on this for if no one, the developer doesn't do anything, the town, what's the time frame like going forward with this project? Does it have to move where it is now to that spot?
So
And so the time frame, is that another 2 years or is that phase 3?
That'll all depend on which option, whether it's the developer,
Right,
a private
okay.
individual, or the town. If this project is approved at town meeting, the development of the CVS building is in the first phase. The Blue Heart Tavern can't stay where it is. It can either be moved to the town's portion of that property and held there while a decision is made, or it could be stored somewhere else. In the case of the Colburn School building, we ended up storing it in the back of the library while we waited for that project to go through. So decisions haven't been made about that yet, and the reason we haven't spent a significant amount of time making those decisions is because we do have people that are interested in using it, but they're waiting to hear what happens at town meeting. So if town
Oh, I
meeting
see.
approves this project, we will go right into negotiations with those parties.
Because it's been sitting there for 2 years plus, another maybe possible year. Just more damage to it. It's all dry rot in there. I mean, let's face it, the building is gone.
The building is
That's
in,
my personal opinion.
the building is in bad shape, but it is a locally historic building, and if we can save it, we will give it our best shot. The reason it sat for 2 years is that there was nowhere to put it. We had one gentleman who searched properties, who went door to door looking for a place that he could purchase to put that on, and it just didn't work out. So we've provided the land. We're hopeful that it'll be restored. If that doesn't work, and having looked at it for the last 2 years and tried other options, if nothing works, the building could be demolished. I hope that's not the case. I think it's an important building in the town.
One other question, the parking on Route 1 north of East Street, there's going to be additional parking spots. So are those, right now it's 2 lanes, Washington Street, I'm sorry. Heading southbound, there's 2 lanes, northbound, there's 2 merges into 1. What's going to happen there? Is it all going to be a single lane?
No, it'll stay the same configuration. The parking spaces will actually come out of where sidewalk is now. So the driving portion of the road will not be widened, but the buildings on the west side of the street will be pushed further back to create those new parking spaces.
So I have many concerns that were already sort of talked about there. I'm not sure if my concerns have been alleviated because I live down the street from respectably Selectman Walsh, sorry, and it took me 15 minutes to travel today from Smith to the light. That's before the bridge expansion. That's before this. And I don't really agree with pass-through traffic will not add to congestion. Isn't that what is adding to congestion? The pass-through traffic. So here are my other concerns. And
The
it goes,
pass-through traffic is existing, so yes,
yeah,
pass-through traffic adds to congestion. The development will not significantly add to congestion.
okay. So here's my question. Maybe this is addressing to the town officials. Going back, yes, it's been 2.5 years that this has been discussed and the residents' feedback has been incorporated and all that. I'd like a little more transparency to alleviate my concerns about the original RFP and that we had a single bid, it appears, and that, and in all due respect, I know the developer's here, but what did the town do to do their due diligence to understand what's written in the RFP? Your financial strength, your experience, your ability to complete this project, and why did we only have a window of just taking one offer? I'm getting my house painted. I'm getting 3 estimates. I need to understand and compare. So if somebody could, because I've looked back at the minutes and I don't see any discussion on this. So also, Mike, if you could also discuss respectfully, how is this decision governed, and how how it was approved? Because the analysis of how you got to 2.2 million, it's not clear to me.
Okay. Okay. So
That was a lot.
that's okay. So I'll try to do them in order if I can remember them that long. The first is the RFP. Why we only had one person. If you think about how the lots are kind of split up, for someone to come in, it just didn't make financial sense for them to just get either the ICC or the Wentworth Hall, or the library, as most people know it as. It was not financially beneficial to them without a bigger piece of land. So the fact that we only have one developer just shows that financially, everyone else who looked at it said, I can't really make any money or enough money on this project to do it the way it is. So that's why we have one person. You know, there were three, I think, total of three, Nora, four that looked at it. 4 proposals came in, 3 actually looked at it, and only 1 came through and said, maybe I can make this work. And so that's how we get to one developer. The $2.2 million that's offered, it's only a half acre at the end of the entire transfer. I know what property in Westwood is worth a lot, but a half acre for 2.2 makes it a $4.4 million per acre. There's not that anywhere in town. So as far as the numbers are concerned, the developer, and believe me, we went through this long and hard, developer has to get financing. Bank looks at it and says, what is the best possible use or the most money you can make out of this before we're going to finance it? And so when we went from 28 apartments down to 18 condos, now I always say this, and I've said it to the developer, apartments are the gift that keep on giving, right? You collect a check every month. Condos, you build them, you sell them, and that's it. Your money's made and you're on. So that brings down the money that the bank is willing to offer, you know, because the resources have been exhausted. And so that's, by getting it down to 18 condos, it's because we listened to the residents who said, I don't want 28 apartments in Islington. I think it's bad for our neighborhood. I think it's bad for the town. So we were able to convince the developer, although we helped, but I think his father actually convinced him it was a good idea too, to go with condos. And so, you know, the condos coming down, the CVS, which was larger in the beginning, the CVS wanted a drive-through. And so CVS says, well, we're not paying you the same kind of money we were going to pay you for a 12,000 square foot one with a drive-through. So now we're down. So all of this contributes to where we are. And the residents had a lot to do with it. How big it was, whether it was a drive-through, whether it was condos or apartments. And so that's, I think at this point in time, this is the best deal that we're going to get. And, I mean, I really do believe that. I've spent an enormous amount of time. My wife would tell you I've spent way too much time based on my pay for the town, which is literally almost zero. And we've done the best that we can. We've negotiated back and forth. We've talked to the developer. He's had meetings even with the residents without any town officials there to hear what they have to say. And so I understand people, some people just don't want the ICC to come down. And that's, I can't change their mind. I can just tell them that from financial benefit, right now we're getting 0 taxes for that building. We're getting 0, you know, for the Wentworth Hall space. We're going to move it across. We're going to get other land back. We're going to get some green space down there. The building is pushed back, and it's a much more economical building. It'll be, he's planning to try to get a restaurant in there, a family restaurant. So there are a whole bunch of other things that are there. And believe me, I read the Facebook comments, so I'm well aware of all the comments. In fact, I don't know if anyone's had a chance even today to look at the Hometown Weekly, because there are 2 articles today. And one is from one of the residents. And I got to be honest with you, nothing drives me more crazy than just hearing wrong things put in the newspaper. For example, it'll have a negative impact on the character of Westwood. Well, if you go through Islington and you look at the Cafe Diva building and you look at the ICC building falling down, Wentworth Hall, and that ugly CVS, you can't tell me that the new design isn't better. The character, it's not the building he built in Dedham Square. It's not. It's not all brick. It has, you know, the feel of something that you would find in a New England town. Increased population density. Can't argue with that one. Yes, we're going to get more people who live down there, but that's how businesses survive. Have to be people there. Place undue strain and stress on our public infrastructure. I don't know what that means. There's going to be more cars there, I guess, or more people there, but that's how we get tax money, is to have people there. Cause an increase in service and delivery costs and property taxes that will burden all residents, especially fixed income residents. We're getting 0 tax dollars right now for that property. How is that a burden to our taxpayers? We're going to be getting somewhere, and I'll say the estimate is $400,000 a year. I know Nora has it at 423. I like to be a little bit more conservative, so I'll say 400. But still, right now we're getting 0. How is that a burden to taxpayers? Let's see, we'll lose millions of dollars in real estate equity. We got a half acre. We're getting 2.2. How are we losing millions of dollars? We might, even if in a best case scenario, and Nora doesn't have this up there, but Brigham and Women's Hospital bought at University Station, and 3 acres are in Westwood, and they paid 8.25 for that land. So it might be a little higher, but it's Brigham and Women's Hospital, and it's at the junction of Route 95 and 128. That has more value, I think, than the corner of East Street and Washington Street. Let me just see here. Lose a community center. We're going to get a new one. We're going to get a more energy efficient community center. So when I read, and I won't go through, there are a couple more, but when I read this and it says I can go on and on, well, I could go on and on about the benefits of it. And I think really at the end of the day that when people really get the facts and not, you know, I like to say the flaming fire, you know, the pitchforks, you know, get out your pitchforks and let's go. I think when people really learn the facts, that this is actually a good deal. It's gonna, I'm kind of hopeful that it passes because honestly, I'm hoping it'll make Islington the center of town and not the High Street side. And with that, I just want to give you a little history, which I did not know. But the Blue Heart Tavern, Mr. Kelly, that you're talking about, apparently if you go back in history, that is when the war in Westwood started between the High Street side of town and the Islington side of town, because the Blue Heart Tavern was the first tavern in Westwood, and the selectmen at that point in time gave another building over here an option to become a bar, and so the war began between which tavern you would go to in town. Did I answer all your questions? You got one more? Did I miss one?
Well, okay. Yeah, who made the decision and governed it? That's by the selectmen.
Well, we made the original decision. Thank you. That's much better. We made the original decision, but actually the taxpayers are going to make the decision.
Right.
We've done the best negotiating. At least I think we've done the best negotiating.
So, and then in the plans,
Yes.
and so the, and again, no disrespect to the developer who's sitting here, but, you know, we're basically providing 3 corners of Islington to one landowner, right? So it predates me, but it sounds like the prior person who owned some of the properties, Magaletta, there was some concerns with how he was maintaining his property or whatever. Mike mentioned some suing or something. So that seems like a risk to me. That how does that get addressed? And especially if in these phases of development, where it sounds like the town is taking the upfront risk.
Well, because we're doing it in phases, we're not really taking an uptown risk. Because if at any point in time, you know, the economy goes tanks again, like it has in the past, we're doing it in phases, hoping that it continues all the way through. But we won't lose anything until we get to phase 3. In fact, we're getting 400 the first time, 400 the second time. And if the deal falls through, we get the land back. So we're really not losing. And I forgot the second half, I'm sorry.
The first half was that, you know,
Oh, about the
somebody
3
would own-
corners.
Yeah, 3
Okay,
corners.
so he owns 2 of those corners already,
Mhm.
right? He owns where the Cafe Diva building is and the tailor shop, and he owns where Wild Blossom and Islington Pizza, that building. And so if he's not really owning it because he has condos now, he has the real estate on the first floor, the commercial space on the 3rd floor, but the residents or the tenants, you know, who buy the condos are going to own the building, you know, anything above the 1st floor. So in that respect, I don't consider it as quite owning the 3 corners. He may have some stake in those 3 corners, but honestly, he'll have rent from CVS, but CVS really owns that corner, to be perfectly honest. So, and they will sign, I think, a long-term lease. That's part of the deal. So they'll be there for a long time. And so that's really, I thought, and be quite honest with you, and I even said this to him, so I'm not afraid to say it publicly. Yes, I had that concern about owning all of Denham Center and owning all of Islington.
Mhm.
And that was part of the thing that was going through my head, and said, you know what, maybe condos are not such a bad idea. And, you know, because then the residents really own the building for the most part.
I'm just going to share my personal experience with you,
Sure.
and you can take it for what it is, okay? I think that there should be some respect for people that believe that the character is going to be changed, and I'll tell you why, okay? I've lived in Islington since 1994. I was here with the Magalettas, the whole 9 yards. I walk a lot, and when I walked down Washington Street in the past, the commercial space was in houses. It looked like little houses with lawns in front of them. So when I walk down, there's a lawn, there's a tree, there's birds singing. Now with 321 Washington Street, I don't have that. I have a building to my left that abuts the sidewalk. I don't have grass. I don't have the space for birds. And I have to watch out now that a car is going to come out of the underground driveway and be on the spot where I'm walking. The style of the building is going to change. That is going to change Islington's character. It's going to be more dense, and you're going to have more buildings right up against the sidewalk. So it does change the experience of the people living there. And that's just my experience. You take it for what it is.
So I won't disagree with you on the building, what is it called? 321 Washington Street. I don't disagree with you on 321 Washington Street. I honestly don't. And I've expressed the fact that I agree with you. I think it's too close to the sidewalk. But the buildings that are going up now, they're no different than what's there now. Cafe Diva's on the sidewalk. I know, but what I'm saying is Cafe Diva is on the sidewalk. ICC is on the sidewalk. Wentworth Hall is on the sidewalk. And CVS is on the sidewalk. So when we move Wentworth Hall, we're moving it back. We're getting green space in front of it. We're getting the Blue Heart Tavern, which is not. So I think I understand what you say about the other side, but we've worked extremely hard to not make it feel that way. In fact, the ICC building, or as it will be newly constructed, on the front side, the dormers are not right on the sidewalk. They're actually set back a little bit, so it doesn't give you that ominous feeling as you walk by it. It's larger, but not from the street side. If you look, Nora, may I have the pointer?
The pointer doesn't work, but
Okay.
tell
I
me
mean
which
the-
you want to go to. Oh, sorry, this one.
Yes, thank you. So the real density, if I figure out, okay, the real density is in this middle section in here. Okay? This is actually the same size as the church. That's there now. This is the same exact, in fact, it's 4 feet lower than the ICC church. It's 4 feet lower. If it gets higher, it's back here, and so not on the sidewalk. So when you walk by, you're not getting any different feeling than you are right now. Now this building is a little bit higher, but I'll tell you what, I'll take the height over getting rid of that ugly CVS building in a minute. And it's not nearly as high as the ICC building. So over here, this building is exactly where the,
Set back further.
and we are setting it back, see, because there's parking here, the front. So they're actually moving the building back and putting parking spaces in front of it. Right now, you have sidewalk, street. You're going to have sidewalk, a parking spot, and then street. So it's actually a much better improvement to the entire area than what's there right now. Aesthetically.
I already lost my green space, okay, with the 321 Washington.
I-
I think the town lost a lot. You lost a lot of trust.
Well, that was by right. We had no control over that. That's land he owned, and the way that it's zoned, he had an absolute right to do that. This, he's working with us, and the town is working with him to make this not the same as the other side.
Not quite, just to fill it in, I'm actually like almost, I'm almost the opposite of what she's saying. I think this is going to improve the town looks, everything. I lived in Islington since 83. Since 83, I've lived here.
The technician is yelling that you need it, so.
Sorry about the cable. And I just, even the steeple, to duplicate the church and everything. I went to early meetings. I was all against that. I just wanted new stuff. It's a new town. And they ended up putting a steeple up, and duplicating everything. So unfortunately, that's why we vote, because we do have different opinions. But I just wanted to share kind of like the opposite.
Jack Campion, 6 Brookfield Road. Since you mentioned the steeple, I'm gonna advocate for the steeple. To me, that's the most important element in this whole thing, personally speaking. At a previous meeting, and Nora mentioned it, that the steeple would be duplicated. I wonder if you could just expound on that a little bit. I want people to understand the importance of the design, the detail of that steeple, and that it will be, in fact, duplicated as is, height and detail. Is that correct?
Here's the rendering. You can see it's an octagonal staple, just like the one that's there now. Giorgio, you might want to speak to this. You're planning to replicate it exactly.
So there's 2 ways we looked at doing this. We're either going to cut it right at the roof line, pick it up with the crane and bring it right to the warehouse, and replicate it right in our warehouse, or we're going to go flying around it with the drone to get all the details, the ins and outs, the crown moldings, the louvers, and all that. So there's 2 ways we're looking at doing it. The easiest way for me is cut it off and bring it right to the warehouse so we can duplicate. We fabricate that right on the ground, and then we put it back on with the crane. We can't put that one back on because it's not, right now with the new fiberglass that they're made out of, they look like wood. So we have to recreate that to not have maintenance. So 10, 15 years, 20 years, it will all look the same as it is day one.
Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer Killay, Willard Circle. You were saying.
Hold it closer. Just closer is better. Believe it or not.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I'm sorry, you were saying that there was a recreation department located inside the Islington Community Center currently?
There's not the department, but there are several recreational programs that take place there after school and in the evenings and on weekends. There's there's a pet training that's a recreational program. There are several early childhood recreation programs that occur during the school hours that work out their arrangement of space with Youth and Family Services and MMO. There are also several evening programs. There might be a babysitter training program, a CPR program. In the summertime, there are some theatrical programs that use that space as well.
So they don't have like a dedicated office or space, something like
They
that?
do not,
Okay,
no.
they just share, okay. Thank you.
But they will have in the new space, the lower level hall will be designed by the library director and the recreation director to suit both needs. We've talked about the possibility of having pull-down computer stations. We talked about the possibility of having a stage that actually folds down when needed and then folds back up so that it's not taking up space when not needed, not a safety hazard. When you have children's programs now in the hall with a stage, it's actually quite difficult for the adults to keep control of the children with that attractive stage. So we're looking at the design from the ground up and developing appropriate space that's suitable for library programs, for recreation programs, for youth and family services, and for general community uses. We have an opportunity to build from scratch, to design the space to best suit our needs.
Thank you.
The existing square footage of the ICC plus library is like 17,000?
It's
That's
not.
11.
So that's,
15,000 or what, and then what will the new one?
It's
Okay,
11, right?
It's a,
it's
I'll take it.
11,031 square feet in the ICC. It's 19,000, I believe, 62 square feet in the library. 1900, sorry, yes, 1900. So there's a lot of misinformation.
This new library is
Yes.
not 19.
No, it's not. There's a lot of misinformation going around. There was a flyer that went out that said we have 17,700 square feet now, and we're going to end up with 8,000. That's not at all true. We have 11,031 square feet in the ICC shared by the town uses and MMO. We're going to get 6,000 square feet of new space for the town uses, 5,000 square feet of new space for MMO. They add up to 11,000 square feet.
no,
It's
sorry,
equivalent.
the ICC and the library.
The
new
library is
library.
being moved. The library is being moved, not eliminated. So the square footage we have in the library will simply be moved over. That's apples
Right.
for apples, not changing. So just under 2,000 square feet in the existing library, just over 2,000 square feet in the relocated library. Then in addition to that building of 6,000 square feet, 2,000 of that will be for the youth and family services and for the handicapped accessible entrance, the restrooms, the shared space. And then 4,000 square feet will be the lower level community space to be shared by all the programs that currently use the ICC building. So a 6,000 square foot addition to handle all the uses that are town uses in the ICC now, and a 5,000 square foot space in the current CVS to handle the MMO uses. Those two buildings add up to the same amount, 31 square feet smaller than what we see today in the ICC. So the misinformation that's out there that we're dropping from 17,700 to 8,000 is simply not accurate.
Thank you, Nora, for this presentation. Thank you, Mr. Gillette, Mr. Walsh. Thank you very much for the contract.
So, if nothing else, we have only less than a week before town meeting. In fact, it's 6 days. If you would just share the right information with people, that's probably the most important thing you can do. I understand, I understand some people are just going to be against it. I understand that. But if you get the information and you're against it, I get it. But if you're getting misinformation and you're against it because you have the misinformation, then that's entirely wrong, and you're doing yourself and the town a disservice. So, yes.
Can you put this like PowerPoint, whatever, like online so people can access it?
Yes, I can. And all of the other information, I think the PowerPoint that I presented to the FinCom is already online. It's very similar. I might have reordered the slides for this one. That's already up there. I will add this one. And there's just one other point that I wanted to add that I don't know that we clearly got across. The cost to the town to renovate, relocate, and put an addition on Wentworth Hall, the total cost of that is just under $3.7 million. That includes soil remediation, rock removal, construction, design, soup to nuts. We're getting $2.2 million from the developer to put towards all of that. The actual net cost to the town is just over $1,481,000 to do all that work to get that new space. If we don't go forward with that, the cost to renovate the ICC, shouldn't even say renovate, the cost to continue using the ICC, replace the roof, make the very minor repairs, and do the same to the library, is over $1.9 million. We're spending $500,000 less of town funds to do this work, to move to a brand new, much nicer facility. And in doing that, we're going from $62,000 a year in annual taxes to $481,000 a year. That means that $1,481,000 that it will cost us to move Wentworth Hall will be recovered from the tax dollars just from this project in 4 years. If we chose not to do the project and we decide we need to spend that $1.9 million just to keep ICC and the Islington Library moving, to keep them occupied, when we spend the $1.9 million and we look at reimbursing that with the $62,000 a year in taxes here, that would take 31 years to pay back. I think that's a good way to look at this. And that's just the Band-Aid fix. If we actually wanted to take the ICC and the library and restore them and get them more useful, put handicapped accessibility, elevators, air conditioning, that would cost over $5 million. That would be an 82-year payback on that amount of taxes that we're receiving, because the taxes don't go up if the town owns the property. When we sell it to the developer, we get increased taxes, and it costs us a lot less.
And honestly, this is where Nora and I disagree. I don't think we can fix it for 1.4 because Massachusetts regulations say that if you go above a third of the assessed value, you have to make it handicapped accessible. So then we'd have to put in elevators, et cetera. So when Nora says 1.4, I disagree on that. I think we're going to get triggered by the state law that we're going to have to spend a heck of a lot more just to get it up to code, which will be required to do by law. So
Just to clarify, it was 1.9 for the existing buildings, 1.481 for the new building. So less money, more taxes, much shorter payback period, and more efficient, energy efficient, code compliant, and handicapped accessible space so all of our residents can use our facilities.
Nora, if you're going to put this on the town website, then you're going to have to make a correction, which I did
Yes.
want to bring up.
Sure, please let me know.
It has to do with the tailor shop. The tailor shop has nothing to do with Crown Cleaners. Crown Cleaners has its own tailor. If you put that up, it looks like
Okay, that wasn't the information I received. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that
he
out.
was Crown Cleaners tailor for 10 years and went behind the back and signed with Giorgio. So Crown Cleaners has has.
Crown
a
Please
tailor.
has a new tailor.
Has a
Yes.
new
So what I
tailor.
was,
But if you put that up, it looks like.
okay,
Yeah,
I will correct that.
Thank you,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. And the other point, and this has to do with town meeting. As you know, we just recently had an election. It's 20% of the people who go and vote. The same thing is going to happen at town meeting. And a lot of it has to do with the day of the week and the time. And I know on Parker Street, there are so many young families. They can't come because daddy or mommy who's working doesn't get home till 7. Now they have to have dinner, etc. So it's just a juggling. Has there been any consideration about moving it to like a Saturday? I'm serious, because again, you're not ever going to get 100%, but I think you would get more than 20%.
Well, the problem what you run into on Saturdays, you run into Saturday sports, and then so we've
No,
debated this back and forth, and we've
Saturday
at one
night.
point in time, there was an article before town meeting to move it to Saturday, and there was an uprising from those that had Orthodox services on Saturday, that we were taking away their right to participate in either the election or town meeting. So that got squashed pretty quickly.
But Saturday night?
It's almost impossible. No matter what day of the week you pick, someone's going to say, you know, I work 6 days a week, and the one day I had off, you pick for town meeting, and I have to do something else. So it's unfortunate, but I think if people really care and want it to happen or don't want it to happen, they do make much
That's
more of an
not
effort
true,
to get there.
because you know, life has changed since mommy was home. You know, you've got both parents working, you know, and then so they've first got to relieve the babysitter, or you know, whoever's taking care of the child, and
Right.
then making the dinner, etc. I mean, those days from when this town was established, life has changed,
Oh,
and I
yes.
think we really need to consider changing the time, because you know, I'm retired, doesn't make any difference to me, but
Well, it starts at 7:30, and our first, 7, 8 articles, which include a presentation on town finances, takes up the first probably half hour, 40 minutes. So I think there's time in there to sneak in dinner and then still come. Not that we like to say that publicly, on television saying it, but,
Try to find a
you have to
parking
understand,
spot. I try
right?
to find a
Well,
parking
that'll be a
spot.
different issue, yes. All right, if no more questions, thank you all for coming. I know the library wants to close, so thank you for joining us. We'll see you hopefully on town meeting. Thank you.
May 30th at the high school.